Hi there guys, Frank Flegg here from Ethical Property Partners, where we help you to make annual returns on a monthly basis from your property portfolio. The reason I'm presenting from here is because we talk about Black Swan events in property. And what I mean by a Black Swan event is something you could never have predicted happening. And this is the risk of people picking one strategy, one geographic area, one investment model. Is you are overexposed to a Black Swan event. And the Black Swan event that they've had here on the Mexican coast, and in fact across the Caribbean over the last few years, is a type of brown algae. I won't bore you with the scientific name. It looks like seaweed, but they are actually collecting this seaweed on a massive basis on these beaches, and they can't keep up. It's being created in the Caribbean by us pouring nutrients into the sea, so the food industry, agriculture, etc., and this algae's blooming, and it's being washed up onto the beaches here in Mexico, in the Quintana Roo Peninsula, by the ton. And some of the expensive hotels are like dragging it down the beach, but then they're leaving a big pile of this seaweed, and it's rotting, and it smells something like vomit, a cross between vomit and feces. It really, I was gagging. There are houses here, $10 million US dollars houses for sale, but I reckon about 20% of the houses and villas here are for sale, and they're beautiful. They're infinity pools looking out over the beach, but they smell. I don't think I'd buy that $10 million property for £250,000 now. It just wouldn't be worth it. I would buy it. It has a value to it. It's beautiful. When the doors are closed, it looks great. But as soon as you step out into that infinity pool, you can smell the weed, and as soon as you go on the beach, it's very, very strong. So would these properties have a value? Yes, but would I buy them now at anything near what they're being marketed at? Not at all. Not in a month of Sundays, because I'm going to lose money on that. And when I was in Costa Rica, I was looking at some of the property there. I met some lovely people. They said, oh, you'd love to live here, you'd love to have your holiday home here. And it was just too expensive, and it was being propped up by American and Canadian buyers. So they were coming down. It was good value for them, and they were beautiful properties on the beach, etc. But as soon as that market evaporates, and it can do for any reasons, maybe there's a terrorist event like in Bali a few years ago where they had the bomb going off, and all of a sudden the Americans and Canadians don't want to go there, they don't want to buy there because the reputation of the country has dropped. Or maybe there's an ecological event like an oil spill, or like some algae growing, and it's not just some algae, it's tons and tons of algae. So why am I sharing this with you on this particular episode? Well, it's because you need to be aware that Black Swan events can happen. You can't predict them, but you should be expecting them to happen. It helps you to be more cautious and more balanced in your investing. So if you see a brilliant deal, you don't go and buy 5 of them in the same block, in the same area, with the same monetization strategy. You perhaps buy one there and one over here and one over here, and that gives you stability. And I'm often criticized for being too boring and too conservative in my investing, but this is why I didn't go and buy 20 properties on this piece of coast, fortunately, because they all are about to drop or are in the process of dropping by 50%, 75%, who knows how far it will drop, but it could drop a long, long way. And that would have wiped me out if I bought enough properties here and they've all dropped by 75%. Who can swallow that kind of depreciation in their portfolio? So that's the first lesson, I would say, or the first point to note, is you need to be aware of the risk, aware of this tall building that you're investing in. Your business model mustn't be the Leaning Tower of Pizza. It needs to be a strong foundation, a wide business that doesn't go too tall, so not all one strategy, using lots of strategies in lots of areas, lots of different clientele, lots of different purchasing methods. And of course EPP's got 62 investment strategies, so it helps. But the second message is not to be paralyzed by fear. Yes, this is bad news for everyone that's bought around here. It's bad news for the hotel owners. It's bad news for those people that are trying to sell that $10 million property. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't invest. If plan A doesn't work, what is plan B? And that's another reason why I wasn't that keen on buying Costa Rica. The secondary plan, the non-serviced accommodation, non-holiday let plan was non-existent. The local people can't afford to rent, and if they could afford to rent, there's going to be such a glut of properties if tourism takes a nosedive in that area, that you'd never have a tenant. You just have an empty property unless you wanted to go there yourself. And so you need to be aware of the risks, still take action, not be paralyzed and say, well, there could be a black swan on any property, so I'm not going to proceed. There could be, but there could also be in your life. You know, your pension could fail, you could be made redundant, your employer could go bankrupt. There could be a pandemic. What about that? That's a black swan event. But these do come up fairly regularly. There are these massive events that people seem surprised by, but actually, should we be that surprised? Because big things happen fairly regularly. Like, no one would have predicted the Suez Canal being blocked for a week. That had quite a big impact on global trade. It wasn't necessarily a black swan event for us in the UK and the US. It didn't have a massive effect, but I bet it did for some companies that are in shipping. I bet it did for companies that had their boats stuck in the canal. So my message to you guys is to be aware that the unforeseen is going to happen, to be cautious of it, to mitigate your risks, but to take action anyway. Until next time, happy investing.